Welcome once again to another Living Hope Today study, my brothers and sisters in Christ. I'm very, very grateful you're here today, and today we have a lot of ground to cover. The Bible is deliberate in telling us how its main characters came into focus and how they entered the stage of salvation history. And today we see the line that takes us from Noah to Abraham spelled out in detail. Let's just review for a second. You remember at the end of chapter 10, we've seen the formation of the nations as the 8 people that got off the ark, Noah and his family, have begun to repopulate the earth, and we're told where all these people go. They go from these, the nations spread out over the earth after the flood. We're told that things are happening. But when you get into Genesis 11, you remember what happens. The first incident is about the Tower of Babel. What's God telling us? Well, he's not going to let humanity live under one language alone. He confuses all the languages. They're not going to make a name for themselves. They're not going to build a tower to the heavens as if they could. No, he confuses the languages and he diminishes the collective power of humanity. And remember, at the end of time, what happens? The collective power of humanity is reassembled under the Antichrist to attack the Lord and his people. Well, Genesis 11, God stops it for now. You get to Genesis 11, verse 10, and we start to go through one of these patterns again where there's a bunch of names and a bunch of years listed. We're going to go quickly. This is the account of Shem. You remember Shem is the son of Noah. 2 years after the flood, when Shem was 100, he became the father of Arphaxad. And after he became the father of Arphaxad, Shem lived 500 years and had other sons and daughters. Notice, in Genesis 11, we're not talking about when they died. It's not stated that way anyway. We know that there's a number of years that they lived, but remember Genesis 5, every sequence like this ended with somebody died. Here we're talking about life. When Arphaxad lived 35 years, he became the father of Shelah, and after he became the father of Shelah, Arphaxad lived 403 years and had other sons and daughters. Here we go. Shelah lived 30 years, became the father of Eber. After he became the father of Eber, he lived 403 years, had other sons and daughters. Notice that the scripture is clear to tell us that there's this whole repopulation happening. When Eber, which by the way, if you recall, his name is where the Hebrew definition or name comes from the name of Eber. Okay, he lived 34 years. He became the father of Peleg. Let me say this too. Remember that Peleg is the one theoretically alive when God scatters the nations. He's referenced in that way when we first hear of him. But as we go forward, after he became the father of Peleg, Eber lived 430 years, had more sons and daughters. 18, Peleg lives 30 years. He has Reu. And after he became the father of Reu, Peleg lives 209 years. He has more sons and daughters. Reu lives 32 years, becomes the father of Serug. After he does that, Reu lives 207 years, has more sons and daughters. We keep going. Serug lived 30 years. He became the father of Nahor. After he became the father of Nahor, he lived 200 years. And guess what? Nahor has Terah when he's 29 years old, and after he became the father of Terah, Nahor lived 119 years and had other sons and daughters. One thing you might notice as you watch this genealogy unfold is that the years of becoming fathers is becoming much less. Remember Genesis 5, some of these people were living 800-900 years. Now they're having their children much earlier in life, and they're living, well, look, Nahor lives 119 years. Okay, well, that's more closely related to modern standards. We get to Terah, and now we come to the central focus of why the Bible is driving us to this. Okay, Terah lives 70 years. Okay, so when he's 70 years old, he starts having children. He became the father of Abraham, Nahor, and Haran. That'll be clarified in a second. But just understand, Tahor is the father of Abraham. That's really the point. This is the account of Terah. Now we're going to single this one guy out. Why? Because we're getting from Noah to Abraham, and now the details of this life need to be included so that we understand exactly what God's driving at. Okay, Terah became the father of Abraham, Nahor, and Haran, and Haran became the father of Lot. Okay, so we'll learn more about Lot as Genesis moves forward, but we're introduced to him here in chapter 11. Okay, God lays the groundwork for what's coming. Now, just to kind of back up here, let's just go back to one of our charts, okay? We're going to see from Abraham to Noah and to, from Adam to Noah and to Abraham. You remember that Adam has Cain and Abel and Seth. Cain kills Abel, so Abel's not going to reproduce. Cain is cursed. Okay, but through Seth, we watch the line in Genesis 5 go from Adam to Noah. All right, very detailed. Now we're going to watch the line go from Noah through Shem. You remember that Noah had Ham, Noah had Japheth, but those aren't the people God is interested in giving us more detail about. It's Shem. When he's 100, and really it's 2 years after the flood that this occurs, according to what we just read. He has Arphaxad. When Arphaxad is 35, he has Shelah. When Shelah is 30, he has Eber. When Eber is 34, he has Peleg. Peleg's 30 and has Ru. Ru's 32 and has Serug. Serug's 30 and has Nahor at 29. And Terah comes along. It says he starts having children when he's 70, but I want you to just catch a technicality. This is probably too much, but you might be interested to know for the next potluck you go to. Terah is said to start having children at 70. He has 3 sons, if you recall what we just read, but I just want you to understand in Genesis 11:32, at the end of this section we're in, we'll be told that Terah lives for 205 years. Okay, in Acts 7, when Stephen is recounting the history of the Hebrews as he's being stoned to death, we learn that Abraham was 75 years when he left Haran. Now, Terah settles in Haran, and Abraham doesn't leave Haran until his father dies. So if his father was 205 years old when he died, and Abraham was 75 years old when he left Haran, that means Abraham was born when Terah was 130. Does that make sense to you? I know, too much information, but you might get a kick out of it. When we get to Terah, watch this, we have Abraham. Okay, now another very, very, very pivotal central character is introduced to us here in Genesis 11. Just a little more background. You remember we saw in Genesis 5 that there were 1,656 years from Adam to the flood. Okay, now if you look at this genealogy we just went through, there's approximately 452 years from the flood to Abraham, depending on how you exactly schedule the years of the flood itself. But what I want you to see is there's roughly 2,100 years from Adam to Abram. Why does that matter? Well, you know, these skeptics, they want to take us to some sort of Earth is millions and millions and millions of years old, and all this stuff took, millennia to happen. The Bible's now laid out for us that in basically 2,100 years, God has created everything that there is. Humanity has progressed to the decadent place where they had to have the flood to judge the sin of mankind. And from there, we've gone on now to having God introduce one of his main characters in salvation to bring us to the understanding of who God is and who we are and how he's going to bring us back into right relationship with him. All right? This is just good information to understand. There's no chance involved here. Everything that's happening is happening exactly at God's decree, exactly in the time frame God has decreed it to be. Very instrumental in our understanding of how God has worked. So to finish chapter 11, we now come to this. While his father Terah was still alive, Haran died in Ur of the Chaldeans in the land of his birth. So now we know that Haran came from Terah. Haran is in Ur when he dies, and Haran is in Ur because it's the land of his birth. So Terah, Abraham, all of Terah's family is living in Ur, which is in Mesopotamia. We'll get to that later when we see God call Abraham out of there. But we're told now some details about what happens. Abraham and Nahor are both married. The name of Abraham's wife was Sarai. God will change that to Sarah. We'll talk about the significance of that when we get there. And the name of Nahor's wife was Milcah. She was the daughter of Haran. So, interesting, a little intermarriage in there. The father of both Milcah and Iscah. All right. Why is God telling us all these things? Well, we get to one of the great facts of salvation history, and that is that Sarah is barren. She didn't have any children. So just think about how this is going to play out. God's going to come to Abraham and say, hey, I'm going to make you the father of nations. Look up there in the sky. You see all those stars? Your descendants will be more numerous than that. Think about the sand and the seashore. Your descendants are going to be more numerous than that. What's Abraham thinking? Well, God, I believe you, but there's kind of a major hurdle going on here, and that is that my wife can't have children. She's barren. This is a terrible thing for a woman in Abraham's day, in many places of the world right now. A woman is judged by her ability to reproduce. Like it or not, that's how many cultures see it. Well, that's definitely how the biblical culture saw it, and the women were ashamed or felt judged by God to not be able to have a child. And now we'll see in the story as it rolls out that God's plan is perfectly in place, and God is not allowing Sarah to have babies so that when the baby Isaac is born, it is clearly a miracle of God, a work of God that no man could muster up in their own strength. Of course, every child born is that, a miracle of God. But anyway, here we are. Sarah had no children. Then we're told Terah took his son Abram, his grandson Lot, son of Haran, again we're told that detail, and his daughter-in-law Sarai, the wife of his son Abraham. Again, the Bible wants to keep clarification right at the front. Here's who these people are. Here's where they are. Here's what they're doing. And together they set out from Ur of the Chaldeans to go to Canaan. So that's the destination. But when we get to Haran, the story stops. Terah says, hey, I like it here in Haran. Now, a little side note for you. Haran is a place that has been known historically to be a pagan worshiping, specifically the moon god worship was prevalent. I just want you to see that despite God's care and despite the survival of the flood by the eight, Noah and his family, and despite the repopulation of the earth, there is still happening what we saw in the early part of Genesis 11, where the sinful nature of man has risen into full bloom again. The defiance of God is real and baked in, basically. People don't want to have anything to do with him. And so Abraham comes from a place of paganism. And his father, most specifically and most likely, chose not to go all the way to Canaan, but to settle in Haran. Why? Because of the pagan worship that was present in that place. That's, if historians are correct, that is what he is used to based on the religions of the land of Ur and then the religions of the land of Haran. And then we're told in conclusion to this section that Terah lived 205 years and he died in Haran. Okay, well, God's plan of salvation is about to come into much clearer focus as the narrative about Abram who becomes Abraham is brought forward. You'll see that Abraham has a conversion moment where he understands that there is only one true God, not this pantheon of gods that paganism would put forward. He dedicates his life to following the one true God. God uses his faith to eventually bless us all by bringing us the Christ, the one who suffers on our behalf through the line of Abraham. But that's for another day. Just know today, all these things are in here on purpose by God's decree for the clarification of us knowing that God is sovereignly in control and there has not been one bit of random chance involved since Genesis 1:1. It's all according to his timing, his plan, and his purpose. God bless you, church. Serve him well today.